So when it comes to OLED TVs, people like to talk about LG and also Samsung's high-end TVs. And not many people talk about Sony. And to be quite honest, I don't either. Last year I had a chance to review a Sony TV and it impressed me in so many different categories. But there still was a few things that I felt it was lacking. Now let's fast forward nearly to 1 year later, my second experience with the Sony OLED. This time, it's the Sony A80L. It has an LG panel and the same image processor as the award-winning high-end Sony A90K. I'm Kevin the Tech Ninja. Let's talk about it. Design-wise, there isn't much separating this TV from any other TV on the market. This TV is made primarily from plastic, and when setting this TV up, you can feel it flex a little bit with its design, but nothing that should cause any concerns moving forward. To set this TV up, it actually required me to watch a video made by Sony, as the instructions for the legs were not good at all. And even in the video, they mentioned the instructions weren't good at all.
Now, some people do tend to have some trouble kind of getting it set correctly because instructions aren't fantastic for it.
But after watching the video, I was able to set it up with just an extra person, and we had the TV up, I would say, in around 10 minutes. Now, the TV stand can be set up 3 different ways. There's a wide position, a narrow position, and then a soundbar position. I'm using the soundbar position. And what that does, it raises the TV up a little bit higher, so if you do have a soundbar, it won't block the view of the TV. Even with it at its tallest position, this TV does not wobble a lot, which is really good when you have a little kid running around the house. We have 4 HDMI ports, 2 of them are 2.1, eARC, and also 2 USB ports. And then we have our regular ports, our Ethernet and digital audio in, and also a tuner. Also, one thing to know is that one of the 2.1 ports is actually an eARC port as well. So if you are running eARC soundbar, you are gonna lose one of your 2.1 ports. We also have a remote that is included with this TV, and it has quick buttons at the bottom, also Google Assistant, and a built-in microphone. The remote is very responsive, it works fine, and there's nothing else more to say about the remote. The TV is running Google TV, which I absolutely love. It has access to pretty much any app you ever will want to install, and the interface is super easy to use. I'm not an expert when it comes to TV, so all this is gonna be subjective with my eye. And I currently own a Samsung OLED and an LG OLED. Now this TV does use a high-end panel, so the black levels are perfect with no blooming, but that's expected with an OLED. But where this TV does lack is HDR peak brightness. What I mean by peak brightness is that when you're watching HDR content, there's areas that will get even brighter than the brightest setting on the TV. And those areas typically on a HDR enabled device, they get very bright to the point where you really can notice how bright that is. Now on this TV, it definitely does get much brighter than the standard brightness, but comparing it to other TVs in this segment, it doesn't get as bright as those. But it does sustain the brightness, whereas other TVs can get dim after you watch the content for a long time. And this brightness comes over to game as well. So when playing Red Dead Redemption, I noticed, especially during the snow levels, the HDR didn't pull through as it did on another OLED that I owned. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't look bad. It just doesn't have that extra oomph, that extra pop. But to get better peak brightness, then we're talking about a more expensive TV, and then we're in a different ballpark. So for this price, for this TV, I think HDR brightness is pretty good, but I did want to tell you what one of the differences would be if you did upgrade to a more expensive device. I do love the colors this TV produces too. Honestly, it's some of the best colors I've seen, and it's extremely impressive. When watching the Spider-Verse, all the hues are green and purples are very bright and vivid. And then when a more subdued color was needed, then I felt this TV held back on those colors too. So you had this realistic color effect. You had vivid and you also had natural as well. Now this TV does handle reflections well. This room has a window and several can lights in the ceilings. And neither of those sources caused a distraction watching TV. You definitely see them on the TV, but it's nothing that starts to glare or anything that causes interference. For 99% of people buying a TV, they would not notice anything I talked about as far as the HDR brightness or anything like that. So if that's something that worried you, you should not worry at all, because this TV's picture quality side by side to even more expensive TVs is nearly identical for me. The A80L is great for games with low input lag. and the contrast and black levels gives games a very good look. You also have two HDMI 2.1 ports, so you can game at 4K 120Hz, and G-Sync and VRR both are supported, giving you some of the best possible performance. Also, if you use PS5, then you actually have access to even more settings and more customization with a Sony TV. Sony made it a point to say that this is the best TV for PS5, but even gaming with my Xbox, performance was top notch as well. Now, there are additional game mode settings like shrinking the screen, which you'll do for a shooter game or anything more competitive so you can see the whole screen without moving your head or shifting your eyes. You can also add crosshairs on top of the screen for competitive gamers. And overall, with everything combined and the low input lag, this definitely is a gaming TV. So let's talk about sound, and what I have said for most reviews still applies here, that if you take audio seriously, you're going to buy a soundbar. But this TV has a trick up its sleeve, and I think it's pretty cool. The whole TV is a big speaker. The speakers are behind the display and they vibrate the whole screen. And this sounds pretty good for a TV, but it does suffer from distortion. But when you add in a Sony soundbar, your TV is now the center channel and you have some amazing sound. The soundbar I'm using is the A5000 with a subwoofer, and it sounds really good. I do recommend getting a Sony soundbar with this TV because it taps into that center channel, and being able to adjust all the settings from the soundbar on the TV and not have to mess with the soundbar remote. And so you have this Dolby Atmos sound, and you have this Dolby Atmos picture, and you have yourself a really great TV and sound system without breaking the bank. This is a great TV. It can rival and compare itself to some of the TVs that are like $3,500, like we're seeing with Samsung, their OLED TV. Now, besides that one thing I mentioned with the maximum HDR brightness, there isn't much that this TV is lacking. And for majority of consumers, they wouldn't know the difference anyways. The TCL QM8, for the price, I would say is more of a budget-friendly TV, and it has a lot of these same great features. But if you want to talk picture quality, then this TV, the A80L, looks better overall, better black levels, and no blooming. And I think for a couple $100, this TV is definitely worth the upgrade. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to pick up one of these TVs, it does help the channel out greatly. Also, the soundbar is linked down below. Kevin the Tech Ninja, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk later.